flying at this point.
This gives you a great view with the nose cone open. That's where the docking mechanism is located. That's the hatch through which these astronauts will fly through Dragon and into the International Space Station. Of course, yesterday during launch, we saw them enter through the side hatch. They won't use that again until they splash down and are back on Earth and egress on the recovery ship. So, we just got confirmation. We have arrived at waypoint 0. We are converging our trajectory on waypoint 1. So again, things continuing to move smoothly. We'll start to get a different view of the International Space Station as we're going to be going to the zenith port. So we're going to be going directly above it. We'll be looking down on the space station. So that view we have right now of the space station looking down on Dragon, it'll be flip-flopped. So Dragon will be looking down on the space station and see Earth below that. So again, we've just reached waypoint 0, which means Dragon is 400 meters directly below station. And we can see it in views now coming from the International Space Station. But coming up, Dragon will move from waypoint 0 to waypoint 1. That'll swing it up and out in front of the space station, actually directly above it, pausing at a distance of approximately 220 meters. Again, that puts us on the docking axis. That essentially means it's directly in front of the docking port. And again, we've heard teams do the go, no go polls. Everything remains go for us this morning. So again, coming up next, we will see
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Approach 0 has started and the trajectory has converged on waypoint 1. Expect arrival at waypoint 1 around 1259er UTC.
SpaceX Dragon copies on the big loop, arrival at waypoint 1 at 1259er.
And just the core communicating with the crew, confirming that they are on their way to waypoint 1. Now, this maneuver from waypoint 0 to waypoint 1 is coming up in just about 30 minutes from now. So we do have some time as this maneuver happens. This is a slow and steady process. Again, we are traveling at 17,500 miles per hour, but the process is slow and steady as we pass through each one of these checkpoints to make sure that we can monitor everything that's happening and make sure that the vehicle is safe, the crew is safe, as well as the International Space Station is also safe before we begin docking with the space station.
We were just talking about what's underneath the nose cone. So obviously the docking port, but we also have those forward bulkhead thrusters. We use those for some of the larger burns. We also have the service section Draco thrusters. Those are positioned around the spacecraft. We'll just be using those service section Dracos as we get closer to the International Space Station. Again, very fine-tuned. And this, I just noticed, is very cool. On the left side of your screen, up a little, if you're looking towards the top of the International Space Station or towards the top of your screen, you can see Dragon Endeavour docked to that forward-facing port. Again, we are going to the zenith port, so you can see that outline perfectly. That's so fascinating. You can also see some of those International Space Station rollout solar arrays, those IROSAs. If you look towards the right side, you know, they look like they are a little bit detached, sort of. They are mounted differently on our solar arrays. Again, we have passed through waypoint 0, heading up to waypoint 1. International Space Station looking especially beautiful this morning. And we are in that orbital daytime. We are now flying over the Atlantic Ocean, so We have, at this point, passed over the continental U.S., North America.
And on your left-hand screen is a view inside of Dragon. On your left-hand side is Commander Jasmine Mogbelli, and on your right-hand side is the pilot for this mission, Andreas Mogensen. Again, they are just monitoring. They are able to confirm, on their displays that what they see matches what we see here in Mission Control as they make their way to docking to the International Space Station. And these views are really awesome. Seeing Earth in the background, looking almost so crisp there.
I know. And Crew 7, once they arrive at the International Space Station, they will have these beautiful views for about 6 months, living and working, doing science and research on the International Space Station. We did get an updated docking time. It has shifted just a few minutes to the right. We're now tracking 9:08 a.m. Eastern Time. Literally just a 3-minute change, so just fine-tuning after we've done the approach initiation burn and that mid-course maneuver. Again, we've passed through waypoint 0, moving up toward waypoint 1. Things continue to look good so far for Dragon Endurance on its journey to the International Space Station. And the astronauts, the first crew to fly on a spacecraft, have the opportunity to name it. And so the first flight of Endurance was the Crew 3 mission. It was named Endurance by the astronauts themselves. Obviously, they said it's a tribute to the tenacity of the human spirit as we push farther than ever with commercial opportunities in low Earth orbit and plans to go to the moon and Mars. So common theme.
Awesome. We're seeing another view from the International Space Station.
Yeah, if you look closely, there's Dragon in the center there. Again, our Cronus flight controller tracking these views for us in Mission Control Houston.
Thank you, Cronus. And as a reminder, as Dragon approached waypoint 0, it was directly under the International Space Station. As it moves to waypoint 1, it's actually going to swing up and align itself with the space station. So you no longer will be looking down from the space station and have that view of Earth in the background, because it will be aligned with the docking port, which is the zenith port today. It's the space-facing side of the International Space Station.
Once our astronauts arrive and our cosmonaut arrive to the International Space Station today, they will be members of Expedition 69. That will remain their designation, so they won't keep these roles, these titles that they have right now. We have Jasmine Mogbelli as our commander. Once she gets to the International Space Station, she will be a flight engineer. And they will remain Expedition 69 until departure of Soyuz next month. That'll be bringing Frank Rubio home. That is when we will enter Expedition 70. So their titles will change over at that point to Expedition 70 crew members. We're about 25 minutes until we expect to reach waypoint 1. Sorry, about 35 minutes, I believe. Again, that's that 220-meter It can be used as a hold point. I don't think we intend to use it as a hold point today, but it is on the docking axis. It'll be directly above the International Space Station, directly above that Zenith port on Node 2. All right, and a reminder, we are taking your questions on X with the hashtag AskNASA. We have one from Sahid asking if there are any problems with docking if they are on the dark side of the Earth, which it does happen several times a day. We see that happen about every 45, 90 minutes, or sorry, a sunrise, sunset every 45 minutes. And do they face visibility issues? So Dragon is fully autonomous. It uses LiDAR to track the International Space Station and to line up with that docking port. The crew members do have the opportunity to take control if needed, but they don't necessarily need to wait for that lighting. The Dragon knows where the station's docking port is, and we have lights out on the exterior of the International Space Station anyway. So sometimes we do hold for lighting just to double confirm, just to make sure, but there is usually no problem docking in darkness.
Yeah, I believe it's actually more of a problem when it's too bright. So when it's too bright, they do take a pause and wait for it to get a little bit darker, just to make sure that, again, because this is an autonomous vehicle, make sure that the Dragon spacecraft can actually see the International Space Station. And we are taking questions on X with the hashtag AskNASA. And this one is, where can I see the post-launch news conference from yesterday? And also, you're doing a good job. Good job,
Thank you
Leah.
so much. Good job, Jesse. Thank you so much. You can find the post-launch news conference on NASA's YouTube. They did a great job breaking down the ascent and what it looks like for this rendezvous profile. So if you want to go back, take a look at NASA's YouTube, you can search for the Crew 7 post-launch news conference, and it should come right up. Next question is, when will Crew 7 be back to Earth?
Well, these are long-duration rotational missions, but the durations are approximately 6 months. So every 6 months, we fly a crew up to the International Space Station, and the crew on board will then return back home. So Crew 7 will be up there for about 6 months and come back.
We're starting to see the views change a little bit. You know, we were looking directly down on Dragon, but now we are swinging up and above the International Space Station, because we'll be docking to that Zenith port. So again, like I mentioned earlier, we were looking directly down on Dragon with the Earth below it. Pretty soon, Dragon will be looking directly down on the International Space Station with the Earth below it. Looks like right now they are flying off the west coast of Senegal, about 260 statute miles above Earth.
And if you're just now joining us, you are tuned in to the Crew 7 mission. The crew launched last night at 12:27 a.m. Eastern Time. 12:27 a.m. Pacific Time, 3:27 a.m. Eastern Time. And now the crew is making their way to the International Space Station. We've already had a few burns. We've passed through checkpoint waypoint 0, and now the vehicle is swinging up towards waypoint 1. We are just under 25 minutes away from the expected time of arrival to waypoint 1, which will put the vehicle in line with the docking adapter on the International Space Station, and also put the vehicle directly above the International Space Station.
So if you're tracking, that's an almost 30-hour ride to orbit. The crew are suited up now. They are in their seats. They have not had to do so during the flight, and we just got a really cool view of one of those Draco thrusters firing, helping us fine-tune our approach to the space station. Our 4 crew members arriving today: Jasmine Mogbelli, Andreas Mogensen, Satoshi Furukawa, and Konstantin Borisov. Dragon looks pretty small in this picture, but we are getting closer and closer to the International Space Station. Waypoint 1 is our next really milestone. That'll be 220 meters directly above the station. We'll pass through that, head to waypoint 2, which is a hold point. It can be a brief pause. That's 20 meters away from the docking port. And once the astronauts arrive, they will be joining a crew of already 7 people living on the International Space Station, so bringing that total up to 11. The other astronauts and cosmonauts living on the station right now are Stephen Bowen, Woody Hoberg, Sultan Al-Nayati, Andrei Fedyayev, Frank Rubio, Sergei Prokopyev, and Dmitry Petelin.
And we just had a view from the International Space Station looking at Dragon from a bit further away, and now we've got a very good close-up as Dragon gets closer and closer to the International Space Station.
Yeah, looking crystal clear. Again, that nose cone is open. Of course, when we launch, it is closed. And when we re-enter its atmosphere, it's closed to protect that docking mechanism that's beneath it. So that's exactly the point that'll line up with that Zenith port on the International Space Station. It'll dock. The teams on the space station will take some time to make sure they pressurize the vestibule. That's the space between the Dragon hatch and the space station hatch. So when Dragon docks, that space is going to be out of vacuum. It's been previously exposed to outer space. And we want to make sure that it's equalized before we open up those hatches and the crew floats in. So that is a process that takes about an hour-ish, making sure that we've got all those levels equaled out before we welcome the crew aboard the space station. Yeah, this is another view from the International Space Station. You can see one of the robotic arms on the left, and close to center of your screen, that is Dragon. And that robotic arm is attached to the Japan exposed facility, so we are able to put some of our experiments outside in the vacuum of space. Again, we are about 23, 22 minutes away from waypoint 1, reaching waypoint 1. Can be used as a hold point. We do not anticipate doing so today. We're heading to the zenith port of the space station on node 2, and it'll continue flying in. It'll be on that docking corridor until it's about 20 meters away. And we are looking for docking today at 9:08 a.m. Eastern Time, 6:08 a.m. Pacific Time. And this again is Dragon Endurance that we're looking at. It flew first on the Crew 3 mission. It also flew the Crew 5 astronauts to the International Space Station.
Dragon SpaceX on the Big Loop. Expect reconfiguration of the C2V2 return link shortly.
SpaceX Dragon copies on the Big Loop.
And a reminder, we are taking your questions on X with the hashtag AskNASA. So if there's something you're curious about, let us know. This question from Jack: what have the astronauts been doing in between launch and docking?
Well, they've been floating around a bit. But they have had some rest periods, some meal periods. They're able to eat while they're in microgravity as they're making their way to the International Space Station. After ascent, once they made it to orbit, they were able to get out of their spacesuits and actually enjoy microgravity. And they've also, needed to follow some procedures. As we're getting closer and closer to the International Space Station, they did have to prepare for some of the burns that enable the Dragon vehicle to get or to approach the International Space Station. So, plethora of activities over the past.
To eat if they want to. They have some shelf-stable meals that they can choose from, and you'll probably hear after docking, they will report out what was consumed. Not necessarily the food itself, but they'll say this many packets from this bag. Everything is so meticulously tracked in space and on the International Space Station. It can be difficult. It's not the same as here on Earth. If I put something down on the table, I know it's going to stay there thanks to gravity. But on the International Space Station, we want to make sure we know where everything is at all times, because it can float away pretty easily. So just reporting also what was consumed, that gives the teams here in Hawthorne as well as in Houston a good look at what is also available for later use as well.
Yeah, and on the broadcast for the launch of Crew 7, NASA astronaut Jessica Meir actually mentioned, how good the meals ready to eat actually are. She really gave an ode to, how cool it is to be able to bring, some flavors from, some of the astronauts' favorite types of food with them to the International Space Station. On Dragon, they aren't able to heat up any of the food, but they are able to hydrate any dehydrated food while on Dragon. And then once they get to the International Space Station, they actually do have the ability to warm up food and have a hot meal. And we do have another question. Again, as a reminder, we are taking questions on X with the hashtag AskNASA. Do the astronauts stay in that seated position the entire trip there? So for Crew 7, that would be for 30 hours.
Yeah. No, that doesn't sound super comfortable, and thankfully they don't have to. So like we talked about, after they get on orbit, after they're out of that dynamic period of flight, the nose cone is opened, they get a call from the Corps here in Hawthorne that they can get out of their seats as well as their suits. So they're able to take their suits off and kind of be in their just their own comfortable clothing, whatever they've worn underneath. We ask them to put those back on shortly before we get into this approach initiation phase. So they are back in their suits right now. They are also in their seats. Of course, we don't expect anything to be off nominal in this situation, and we are moving pretty slowly, but it's still considered a dynamic period of flight because we're getting closer to the International Space Station and docking itself. We are about 15 minutes from waypoint 1. Again, our next pit stop on the way to the space station, about 220 meters above the Node 2 Zenith docking port.
And Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. C2V2 link reconfiguration is complete. Could you give us a quick comm check?
SpaceX Dragon, time check on the big loop.
We have you 5x5.
Have you seen?
Hearing that conversation between the core and the crew, that is Shiva Bharavaj down there in Mission Control, Hawthorne. And they were talking about C2V2, that's Common Communications for Visiting Vehicles. So the Dragon spacecraft and International Space Station both use this language essentially to talk with each other, and it is properly configured so they continue to have good communication between both of those spacecraft. So currently on board the International Space Station, judging by the timeline, it looks like Woody Hoberg is now in position monitoring Dragon's approach. They can actually send commands from Dragon or from the International Space Station to Dragon if need be, if there was some reason that we needed the spacecraft to retreat. Obviously, we're not tracking anything this morning, but he'll be monitoring that approach as they get closer all the way through docking, and then he'll be the person to work through the depressurization of the vestibule and make it a welcoming transition from Dragon to the space station for the 4 new crew members.
And we are currently maneuvering from waypoint 0 to waypoint 1. We are expecting to arrive at the waypoint 1 checkpoint at 5:59 a.m. Pacific time. And again, this will put Dragon directly above the International Space Station. So you could see on your screen, Dragon made its way to waypoint 0, which was directly under the International Space Station, so between Earth and the International Space Station. And now it is swinging upwards and will be above the International Space Station, basically on the space side of the station. And again, we are expecting that arrival at waypoint 1 at 5:59 a.m. Pacific time.
And we got the go from the International Space Station team that they are good to have Dragon proceed past waypoint 1. So Waypoint 1, they will stop at waypoint 2 again. That's about 20 meters from the space station. That's the final checkpoint before moving in. And we expect to see them at waypoint 1 in about 12 minutes from now. Shortly after that, it moves pretty quickly. It is slow and steady, but at the same time, we're anticipating docking at 6:08 a.m. Pacific. That is 9:08 a.m. Eastern time. So just about 30 minutes from now, we should see our new crew arrive at the space station. Of course, if we needed to, we can hold at waypoint 2 for quite a while, just to make sure we have conditions on the spacecraft, on the International Space Station, any lighting conditions, just the way we want them before we move on in.
And just to recap some of our milestones, we had an approach initiation burn at 4:29 a.m. Pacific time. That's 7:29 p.m. a.m. Eastern time. As well as we did require an approach initiation mid-course maneuver, which happened at 4:56 a.m. Pacific time, 7:56 a.m. Eastern time. And again, we've passed through waypoint 0. We're on our way to waypoint 1. And as Leah mentioned, after waypoint 1 is waypoint 2, just 20 meters from the International Space Station. There will be that will be a checkpoint where they will make sure that everything is good before docking. And again, docking is autonomous. Dragon is an autonomous vehicle. So the astronauts still are just monitoring all the way until the vehicle basically latches onto the International Space Station.
We'll start hearing more and more chatter, too, as we get closer between all the crew members. And one of the call-outs that we'll hear just as the crew is about to make contact with the International Space Station is CHOP, or that stands for Crew Hands-Off Point. That's about 2 meters from the space station. At that point, the crew should not be sending any commands to Dragon. However, again, we really don't anticipate that they would be because it is an autonomous docking. So about 10 minutes away till we reach waypoint 1. Again, we're going to move right on through, head to that waypoint 2 hold point, and then we are about 20 minutes away from docking itself. So again, we're docking to the Node 2 Zenith port today. That's the space-facing port. And this is, we may not see the docking. We may see it. But we have 2 bands of communication on the International Space Station. We have the KU band, which is how our video comes down. We have the S band. That's our sound and audio. The KU band antenna, we do something called KU masking. So we send commands to this antenna to not radiate in a certain area because it could reflect off of Dragon and the International Space Station. So we don't want that to radiate onto Dragon and back on the antenna itself. It can damage the antenna. It's a higher power KU link, so we don't want to damage that antenna dish if we don't have to, obviously. It can, risk the electronics inside, any tracking sensors. So we may not see docking. There is still a possibility. It just kind of depends on the location of those antennas at the time. But if we don't have video of the docking from that one location, obviously we will still have audio communications as well as comms with the crew to let us know that Dragon has arrived.
Again, if you're just now joining us, you are tuned into the Crew 7 mission. The Crew 7 crew is inside of that Dragon vehicle that you see there on your screen, and they're currently making their way to waypoint 1, which we expect to reach and pass through without a hold in about 7 minutes or so from now.
This view coming from a camera on the International Space Station of Dragon continuing its approach. Again, we are going up and above the space station, so we may eventually have some views of Dragon looking down on the station with the Earth below it. We do anticipate entering an orbital nighttime here shortly. It looks about like 10 minutes till the next sunset. Currently flying 269 statute miles over the Indian Ocean, south of Africa. Another view here from the International Space Station. Dragon is that big bright object pretty much in the center of your screen. And this view in Mission Control Hawthorne here at SpaceX headquarters. So we do see, we just had some great views of Dragon from the International Space Station. We've had views of the space station from Dragon. We use the tracking data relay satellite systems as we orbit around the Earth. So we have these handover periods when the space station's satellites are transferring essentially from one to the other, that KU band, as we were talking about, that video comms coming down. We have these short handover periods within which we're, again, switching those ground stations or the satellites, making sure we pick up shortly. So these are planned, or they're tracked, essentially. We can also extend these if needed. So sometimes we can get a little more time on a different satellite. Let's say we're on a spacewalk and we don't want to have maybe a 10-minute loss of comm. So we're able to work with the other users of these satellites or these ground stations and make sure that we're getting constant communication at that time. So right now we are taking views from Mission Control Hawthorne on the left, Mission Control Houston on the right, as we are getting into these dynamic operations when we will be seeing Dragon get even closer to the International Space Station.
And both of these teams on your screen are actively working. They're currently working in tandem, as we need both the team monitoring Dragon to coordinate with the team monitoring the International Space Station, as we are basically bringing the two together as we speak.
So again, we do expect to get those communications back, those videos back from Dragon and from the space station pretty shortly. But we are tracking to arrive at waypoint 1. Again, we're passing right through waypoint 1 today. We didn't have the need to stop. Both teams polled that they are go to pass through and head to waypoint 2. But we're expecting to see or hear that call out of waypoint 1 in just a couple of minutes. Again, we're tracking
Dragon SpaceX on the Big Loop approach 1 and soft capture ring extension will begin shortly, and then expect Dragon to continue approach to waypoint 2.
SpaceX Dragon, copies all.
All right, right on time. We are again expecting waypoint 1 arrival in just a couple of minutes. Docking could happen as soon as 10 minutes from now. Also heard the call to the crew that the soft capture ring extension will begin shortly. That's the first step in docking. We have soft capture, and this ring will retract, pulling Dragon into the International Space Station, that international docking adapter. And then there are a set of 12 hooks that will securely attach Dragon to the docking adapter. That's what we call hard capture. After that, we'll get into our depressurization of the vestibule.
Also, a part of docking is where the Dragon spacecraft will actually connect an umbilical, set of umbilicals, to the space station, basically provide power to Dragon while it's on the International Space Station.
So again, as we get closer to docking, if you are just joining us, this is NASA's SpaceX Crew 7 mission to the International Space Station. We have 4 members aboard Endurance today: Jasmine Mobelli, Andreas Mogensen, Konstantin Borisov, and Satoshi Furukawa. They are scheduled for about 10 minutes from now to arrive at the International Space Station, reaching waypoint 1 here, about 220 meters directly above their docking port. So we hear those Quindar tones. We like to pause to make sure that we can hear the real stars of the show. The teams in our mission control rooms talk with the crew members aboard the spacecraft.
We did expect to pass through waypoint 1 at 5:59 a.m. Pacific time. So that may be why they may be trying to establish comms here. We'll see if we can get an update here shortly.
Yeah, that's our crew. That's Crew 7. They will be arriving here just within the next 10 minutes, potentially. We have on the left, from the left, Jasmine Mobelli, NASA astronaut and the commander of Crew 7. To her right, pilot Andreas Mogensen. Next to him is Satoshi Furukawa, JAXA, Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency astronaut. And on the far right, Konstantin Borisov of Roscosmos.
Station, Houston on the Big Loop.
Houston Station with you on the Big Loop.
Okay, Woody, we're ready for you to monitor approach per step 3 of 1.102 Dragon approach and retreat monitoring. Let us know when your review is complete and you are ready for docking.
Amy, I copy. Monitor approach per step 3. Review of steps 5 and 6 is complete, and ISS is ready for docking. Welcome, Crew 7.
Excellent. And for your awareness, at waypoint 2, Dragon will briefly pause to align for docking and then automatically resume approach.
Station copies.
All right, and that was communication from the Capcom in Mission Control Houston. It's Amy Dill this morning communicating with NASA astronaut Woody Hoburg on the International Space Station. Again, he's primed for monitoring this approach and docking of Dragon. So they are getting all set up on the space station side ahead of docking. Again, we're looking for that to happen around 6:08 a.m. Pacific time, so within the next few minutes.
Yeah, it's getting pretty exciting. Initial contact between Dragon and the International Space Station is expected, as Leah said, at 6:08 a.m. Pacific Time, 9:08 a.m. Eastern Time. Before reaching Waypoint 1, mission operators conducted a go-no-go poll to allow Dragon to begin its approach to Waypoint 2, which is located inside of the Keep-Out Sphere, about 20 meters away from the space station.
As we've talked about previously, all of these visiting vehicles take this phased approach to the space station. They stop at these predetermined gates for teams to run quick checks on the vehicle performance before approaching the space station. So we know slow and steady wins the race when it comes to bringing two spacecraft together. The docking operations require a really great deal of precision to make sure we're keeping the spacecraft and obviously the crew safe.
At the 20-meter distance from station's docking adapter, Dragon's approach will slow, and it will begin to align itself with the adapter to come in for the final approach.
Dragon will make its first initial soft contact with the adapter's soft capture ring, which will then retract to bring Dragon in for the hard capture sequence. As a further precaution, Dragon's soft capture system includes a set of rotary spring dampers that helps lessen the force of the contact between the capsule and the station. So for a little bit more of an update on what's happening on the International Space Station and in Houston, let's check in with Sandra Jones. Sandra?
Thanks, Leah. Right now, the crew on board Space Station is awake and preparing for the upcoming docking of Dragon to Space Station. Everything continuing to look good here on the Space Station side. NASA astronaut Woody Hoburg will...
Soft capture ring extension is complete.
SpaceX, the Dragon copy, soft capture ring deployed complete.
Good words there up to the crew. So as I was saying, Hoburg will be in the station's cupola using special software to track Dragon's approach and make sure it stays in the expected zones. Hoburg will also be primed for hatch opening operations once Dragon is docked. He'll start by opening the large hatch on node 2 Zenith, which will give him access into the pressurized mating adapter. The crew will then have to pressurize the vestibule, which is the small space between the hatches on Dragon and Space Station.
And
this
Dragon
was exposed
SpaceX
to vacuum prior to docking.
Has pulled go for approach 2. Please confirm visors are down and that you are ready for docking.
SpaceX Dragon copies on the big loop go, and also crew members have the visors down. We are ready.
Excellent news, Dragon. Ground is going to be enabling approach shortly, and a reminder that after the crew hands-off point, retreat and breakout are not permitted.
Dragon copies.
And great calls again up to the crew, letting them know everything is going smoothly. We're getting really close to docking, just confirming that they have their visors down and they can be in that configuration ahead of docking. So everything good here from the space station side. I'll toss it back over to Hawthorne so that you guys can give us an update on your end.
Thanks, Sandra. And we did hear the Corps also call out that CHOP, which is the crew hands-off point. Basically, that means that the crew must be hands-off. In case of any aborts that happen during that time, it will be done by Dragon. Now, Waypoint 2 is up next, and that will put Dragon only 20 meters away from the space station. From here, the spacecraft will focus on aligning its docking system with the International Docking Adapter.
Yeah, so we're getting pretty close. Right now, it looks like we are about 80 meters from the
This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service.
Also, a cool thing in this view is Dragon is now directly above the International Space Station, and you can tell in the view because you can see the clouds on Earth in the background.
And it looks like we have reached that 20-meter waypoint 2 mark.
Station, Houston on the Big Loop. Dragon is on final approach and is go for docking. Monitor for steps 5 and 6 in 1.102 Dragon approach and retreat monitoring.
Houston Station copies all.
All right, confirmation from Amy Dill, the Capcom in Mission Control Houston, to the crew. that they are moving in for docking. So we are now 16 meters away from the International Space Station. Again, continuing slowly into the Node 2 Zenith port for docking today.
It's such a cool view. It almost feels like we're on Dragon approaching the International Space Station.
Space Station and Dragon now flying over Australia, and Dragon just 13 meters away. Again, a very methodical and careful approach to our docking port. Great views coming from Dragon this morning as we get ready to welcome 4 new crew members to the orbiting laboratory.
Dragon is at 10 meters.
Copy, 10 meters.
And we are just moments away from Dragon docking with the International Space Station. First will be a soft capture, and then there will be 12 hooks deploying 6 at a time to create that hard capture between the vehicle and the station.
Dragon now just 7 meters away, now 6 meters away from the Node 2 port.
5 meters.
Copy, 5.
That call coming from Dragon Commander Jasmine Mogbelli, her first space flight to the International Space Station. Standing by for the call of crew hands-off point, or CHOP.
Copy, CHOP. And Dragon, we see soft capture complete, and attenuation will begin shortly.
Dragon copies.
And contact confirmed. 6:16 a.m. Pacific time, 261 statute miles over Australia.
Guys, thank you for the welcome.
And that welcome coming from the crew aboard the International Space Station. Endurance has arrived with its international crew. They will begin the hard capture sequence shortly, but we are now up to 11 crew members on the International Space Station after they float through the hatch this morning.
And on the big loop, ring retraction is in progress.
Dragon copies, ring retraction in progress.
Now, again, we don't have views right at this moment of Dragon on the International Space Station, but we did see that docking again at 6:16 a.m. Pacific time as the International Space Station and Dragon were flying 261 statute miles over Australia.
And there's still a few steps to complete before Dragon is securely attached to the station. We've now done the soft capture, but then there will be the completion of the soft capture ring retraction, as well as hard capture sequence beginning, and then finally hard dock completing. And again, that will require 12 hooks to deploy. Again, 6 at a time will deploy to make that hard capture completion.
Of course, once we have a successful hard capture, it still is going to take a little bit before we see our crew members float through the hatch into the International Space Station and officially bring us up to that total of 11, at least for about the next few days or so. We will first pressurize the vestibule. Well, Woody Hoberg will open the station side of the hatch. He will pressurize the vestibule, the space between both of those hatches, the Dragon hatch and the station hatch, bringing that to the same pressure as is inside Dragon and the space station. It's much of what we are used to here on Earth. Eventually, they will bring the crew members aboard. Again, they will give us a welcome ceremony. We'll get to see them and hear their first remarks about their visit to the space station, maybe what the ride was like. Then they will move right into work. They will start their safety briefing with the crew, making sure that they remember all their training from the ground, get brought up to speed on the International Space Station itself. Space Station, first on Crew 3, then with Crew 5, now Crew 7. It joins Dragon Endeavour, both docked to the Node 2 module, also known as Harmony.
And that next step, soft capture ring retraction, is typically expected about 4 minutes after soft capture. So we should...
And Dragon ring retraction is complete. The docking sequence is holding for MCS reconfiguration.
Dragon copies.
And what perfect timing. Soft capture ring retraction is now complete.
As you mentioned earlier, during this time, we're also connecting an umbilical from Dragon to the station. Dragon has been using power generated by its solar arrays, also battery power. Once it's connected to the International Space Station, it can start using power from the station itself. You got a great view of those solar arrays as we were flying in this morning. And so at this point, Dragon will probably start using the station power for the remainder of its time on the space station over these next 6 months. And again, we do have soft capture complete for Dragon Endurance. We are standing by for the start of the hard capture sequence. This process takes several minutes, but it is the securing of 12 hooks from Dragon to the International Space Station, giving us that firm, secure hold.
MCS configured. Proceeding with hook driving.
And we did hear that call out, proceeding with hook driving. That is the beginning of the hard capture sequence. Again, as Leo was just mentioning, there will be 12 hooks, and they will deploy 6 at a time. So there'll be 6 hooks first. Once those are fully latched to the International Space Station, then the next set of 6 hooks will begin to deploy. And this process should take a few minutes, about 4 minutes or so, until hard docking is complete.
Again, we welcomed Crew 7 to the International Space Station at 6:16 a.m. Pacific time this morning. Here's your view inside Dragon Endurance right now over the shoulder of our commander, Jasmine Mogbelli, and pilot, Andreas Mogensen. It was Mogbelli's first trip to the International Space Station and Mogensen's second. This is also Konstantin Borisov's first trip to the International Space Station. And Satoshi Furukawa is returning as well. So he is the most experienced on this crew when it comes to days in space. I believe he has 165 days from previous missions. This is the view that we saw as we were preparing for docking. It was giving us great views of the docking port itself. Now that we have completed that soft capture, we are obviously pulled into the space station. And those first 6 hooks are driving. We are right now, so we'll see those first 6 hooks drive, followed by the second 6, at which point they will be considered officially hard docked to the space station. We're getting some good progress on the hooks driving. It looks like the second 6 are now starting to drive.
原来好的益生菌真的可以帮助入睡。太阳星全效克菲尔益生菌是国家认证 AB 克菲尔益生菌，含7种有身份证的专利活菌，能产生伽巴、色氨酸等助眠因子，难怪吃了更快入睡，也睡得更好。太阳星全效克菲尔益生菌也是台湾市场上唯一添加克菲尔乳杆菌 M1 的产品。这是由台湾知名的大学季转，对季节敏感、调整体质的朋友真的是一大福音。还有这支还添加被称为超级食物的羽衣甘蓝萃取物，不少研究都指出十字花科蔬菜有助抗炎及防癌，像是羽衣甘蓝含有高量的叶黄素、贝塔胡萝卜素、维生素 K、维生素 C、叶酸等丰富营养素。太阳星全效克菲尔益生菌专利制成，无塑化剂、无重金属、无人工添加物、无410项农药、无香料调味剂、无防腐剂、无色素，7大保证、7大认证，觉得好安心。每日克菲尔，时刻美好 ，Good Feel Feel Good， 快点购下单！太阳星全效克菲尔益生菌。